Every gilded cage is built with walls of comfort. The only question is what you're paying for them.
Today, we're going to map out a worldview that's been pieced together from a whole range of different source materials. Now, our goal here isn't to figure out what's true or what's false. Instead, we're just trying to understand the architecture of a narrative that, frankly, challenges almost everything we think we know. It's a journey into a totally different way of seeing the world. So let's start with the one core belief that holds this entire thing together.
This quote from way back in 1844, which you see in a lot of these texts, is the perfect place to start. It really captures the fundamental idea that's at the heart of this entire framework. The belief that what we see in public, our reality, is basically just a stage play, and the real directors are hidden from view, working behind the scenes.
All right, so let's dig into that foundational pillar. The sources we're looking at all kick off from the same premise, that major global events, wars, economic crashes, big political shifts, these things aren't just random, chaotic accidents. No, the claim is that they are the deliberate results of a plan guided by a power structure that we never, ever see. As you go through all this material, one term just keeps popping up over and over, the hidden hand. It's the label they use for the shadowy network that's supposedly pulling the strings of governments, economies, and entire societies. The central claim here is that the real power isn't in places like the White House or 10 Downing Street. It's in these closed circles that operate completely outside of any public accountability.
So who exactly is this hidden hand? Well, according to the sources, it's not some single, simple group. It's more like a really complex, tangled web. As you can see here, it's said to include these incredibly powerful banking families that control how money is made, intelligence agencies that act as their enforcers, and then you have these ancient secret societies and bloodlines that allegedly pass this power down through the generations.
Okay, so that leads to a pretty crucial question, right? If some hidden group really has this kind of power, how on earth do they keep control over billions of people? Well, the sources point to three key pillars: the financial system, the political machine, and, maybe most importantly, the information that we consume every single day. The financial system often gets singled out as the #1 tool of control. For instance, one source describes the Federal Reserve not as a branch of the government, but as a private cartel of big banks that has the legal power to literally create money out of thin air. And that ability, the power to control the money supply, well, that's presented as the ultimate source of power over entire nations and their economies. And to back this idea up, the source material often brings up this quote, which they attribute to President Woodrow Wilson, the very man who signed the Federal Reserve Act into law. It's presented as this tragic insider's confession, a president realizing way too late that he just handed over his country's financial sovereignty to a private, powerful elite. All right, so after money, the second pillar of control is information. The argument here is that what we see, what we read, what we hear, it's all carefully curated. The sources claim that search engine results are deliberately tilted toward authority, not just relevance, and that the mainstream news doesn't just report events, it frames them in a very specific way that manufactures our consent for a pre-decided agenda. So, think about it. If you can control the present through money and information, what's the next logical step in this worldview? You control the past. The claim here gets really deep, that our official history, the stuff we learn in school, isn't an objective record of what happened. It's a story that was crafted to keep us from understanding who we really are and what we're capable of. This timeline really highlights the massive gap between the official history and the narratives that are presented in our sources. For every single one of these huge historical moments, this worldview offers a completely different explanation, one that always points to some hidden knowledge or a coordinated conspiracy. We're not talking about minor disagreements here. These are two fundamentally different realities. And this rewriting of history, it goes all the way back. Several sources tell this incredible origin story about non-human beings. They call them the Anunnaki, who supposedly came to Earth ages ago looking for gold. In this telling, they genetically engineered humanity to be a workforce, and after some huge, catastrophic flood, they divided up the planet among themselves, setting the stage for our oldest civilizations. Okay, so this is where this alternate worldview really takes a dramatic turn. This is where the claims escalate from controlling human systems, like money and politics, to actually manipulating the very fabric of our physical world, our consciousness, and even reality itself. For example, just look up at the night sky.
The sources ask us to question something as fundamental and familiar as the moon. They propose that it might not be what we've always been told. They suggest it's some kind of anomaly, something that just doesn't fit the profile of a natural satellite. So, what's the evidence for this wild idea? Well, the sources point to a bunch of strange things. For example, they bring up the Apollo 12 mission, where NASA crashed a part of the ship into the surface, and it supposedly caused the moon to ring like a bell for over an hour. A solid rock doesn't do that. They also claim it has this strange density inversion, where the outer layers are denser than the inside, the exact opposite of how planets are supposed to form. Now, this idea that reality isn't as solid as we think, it doesn't stop with the moon. It extends right into our own minds. Some sources talk about something called the communal reality theory. The basic idea is that our collective consciousness isn't just a passenger, it's actively shaping the world. As evidence, they point to studies where big groups meditating seem to cause crime rates to drop, and these weird experiments where major global events, like 9/11, corresponded with strange anomalies in random number generators. It's as if our collective focus can literally impact the physical world. And all of this builds up to what is maybe the most profound and honestly the most disturbing claim in this entire worldview. One source just puts it out there bluntly that at some point in our distant past, humanity was infected, that some kind of non-human pathogen actually altered our DNA, cut us off from our true spiritual potential, and then fed us a false history to keep us divided, disempowered, and totally confused. So, where does all this leave us? Well, it brings us to this final, huge, lingering question that this whole framework forces you to ask. When you're presented with two completely different versions of everything, of history, of reality, of what it even means to be human, the real challenge isn't just about picking one to believe. The real challenge is, how do you even begin to navigate that massive chasm to figure out what's real?